Safeguarding your pelvic floor during pregnancy. There are a number of things that we can do to keep your pelvic floor strong, but also able to relax and respond to various demands throughout pregnancy and the postpartum period. In this video, I'm going to quickly go through them very briefly because in this core basics section, I've got into each of them in more depth. So let's go through them now. 1, addressing breathing mechanics, and in particular, ensuring that the top of your system isn't overactive. Head to the breathing tutorial with 4 breathing techniques for your core and pelvic floor during pregnancy to go into more depth on this. Number 2, breathing out on the effort during exercise and daily life. This is otherwise known as blow before you go. So when you're picking something up or when you're coming up out of a squat, to just breathe out rather than hold your breath or bear down during that movement. This helps reduce intra-abdominal pressure and reduce demand on the pelvic floor, and hopefully trigger the pelvic floor to contract and support you. Number 3, keeping your pelvic floor strong, doing kegels. Research shows that performing kegels throughout your pregnancy can help keep your pelvic floor strong and prevent pelvic floor dysfunction. Please note though that we also want to be able to relax your pelvic floor, not just contract it. There is such a thing as a too tight pelvic floor. Number 4, we want to address toilet habits. Going to the toilet is a great opportunity for pushing down really hard on a pelvic floor that isn't relaxed. This can put us at risk for pelvic floor dysfunction or hemorrhoids. So there are some simple techniques that you can employ to avoid pushing down on your pelvic floor when it's in that vulnerable position. 5, not lifting too much weight. As you probably know by now, I am a big fan of lifting weights, of resistance training during pregnancy, during the postpartum period, during our entire lives. But there is such a thing as too much as well as too little. There's always a sweet spot. And during pregnancy, your sweet spot is likely to move down a little bit. Lifting too much weight can put a lot of demand on your pelvic floor. It could weaken your pelvic floor, but it could also make it too tight. I've laid out some very specific guidelines in this core basics program to help you determine what the right weight is for you, whether you're a beginner or an advanced lifter. Also, it's worth knowing which exercises are higher demand on your pelvic floor. So for example, a squat is much higher demand on the pelvic floor than a bench press or a glute bridge. Partly because of your body position. So if you're standing upright, there's a lot more weight on the pelvic floor. And in the bottom of a squat, your pelvic floor is wide open and stretched, which makes it a lot harder for the pelvic floor to cope with. That doesn't mean it's bad, it just means that it's a higher demand. And it's important to take that into account as you progress through your pregnancy. Impact. Impact is very high demand on your pelvic floor, so running and jumping. For that reason, there's no impact in this program whatsoever, nor is there impact in my postpartum program. However, many of you will be keen to continue running, and I've created guidelines for running during your pregnancy as part of the core basics program. Identifying symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction. So a lot of the time we get told to listen to our body, but we don't always know what signs to listen to. Some common signs of pelvic floor dysfunction to watch out for are leaking during any particular exercise, feelings of heaviness or bulging in your pelvic floor, or a feeling that there's a tampon in there, or any sort of pain in your pelvis and hips might be a sign that you need to reel back. So if you're running and experiencing hip pain, it might be a little bit too much for you right now. I don't know what number we're on, but glutes. Keeping your glutes strong. Glutes and pelvic floor are BFFs. Keeping your glutes strong during pregnancy and the postpartum period can really help support your pelvic floor. And there are many glute exercises that are very low demand on the pelvic floor. During this program, there's going to be a lot of focus on your back and bum, so that's already programmed in. Finally, so this must be number 10, go and see a pelvic floor physiotherapist. Even if you're not experiencing any problems, it can be a really good idea to see a pelvic floor physio during your pregnancy to check that everything's okay, to check that you don't have a too tight pelvic floor or a weak pelvic floor, And they can also help you troubleshoot breathing mechanics or any problems. Really good ones can also help you prepare for birth. Postpartum, it's essential to go and see a pelvic floor physio, especially if you had a vaginal delivery, even if you're not experiencing problems. Follow these guidelines and you'll keep your pelvic floor strong, but also relaxed during your pregnancy. Go through each of the different sections in this Core Basics program to go into more depth and to learn more and connect to your pelvic floor and your abdominal muscles and understand what they're doing during different activities.